Scary telling.
It was just another day in our old Victorian house. My daughter was sitting on the couch, watching her favorite show on TV, while I was preparing dinner in the kitchen. Suddenly, I heard her scream, and I rushed into the living room to see what was wrong. She was cowering on the couch, pointing at the TV. "It's watching me," she said, tears in her eyes. I tried to calm her down, telling her that there was no one watching her, but she was inconsolable. I eventually covered up the power light on the TV with a book, which seemed to make her feel better. Later that night, after putting my daughter to bed, I sat down in front of my computer to catch up on some work. As I was typing away, my daughter burst into the room, pointing at the power light on my computer. "It's watching me too," she cried. I tried to explain to her that it was just a machine, but she wouldn't listen. The next day, I was getting ready for work when I noticed something odd about my sonic toothbrush. The power light was flickering in a strange pattern, which I couldn't explain. I brushed it off, thinking it was just a glitch in the device, and headed out the door. But the events of the past few days had shaken me, and I found myself constantly looking over my shoulder as I went about my day. When I returned home that night, my daughter was waiting for me with a worried look on her face. "Daddy, I don't like this house," she said. "I feel like we're being watched." I tried to reassure her that there was nothing to be afraid of, but deep down, I felt a growing sense of unease. As we sat down to dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the house. The doors seemed to creak louder, the whispers in the empty rooms seemed to grow more intense. That night, as I lay in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone in the house. I heard a faint humming sound coming from the bathroom, which I dismissed as my imagination. But then I heard my daughter's voice, faint and scared, coming from the same direction. "Daddy, it's watching me again," she said. I got up, heart racing, and rushed to the bathroom. But when I got there, I found nothing out of the ordinary. The toothbrush was in its holder, the power light flickering as usual. I tried to reassure my daughter, telling her that there was nothing to be afraid of, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. As I lay back down in bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that there was a malevolent force in the house. My daughter's paranoia was starting to infect me, and I knew that something had to be done to put our minds at ease. Little did I know that the worst was yet to come. The strange occurrences in our house continued to escalate, and my daughter's paranoia only grew more intense. I tried to rationalize the odd things happening around the house, but it became harder and harder to explain away. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard a faint whisper coming from the hallway. I got up to investigate, but when I looked down the hall, I saw nothing. I brushed it off as my imagination, but as I settled back into bed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The next morning, I woke up to find that the doors in the house had been left open. I asked my daughter if she had left them open, but she shook her head, looking just as confused as I was. As I went about my day, I noticed other odd things happening around the house, like items being moved from their usual spots and unexplained drafts. As the days went on, my daughter's paranoia grew more intense, and I found myself constantly on edge, always listening for any sign of something out of the ordinary. One night, as I was settling into bed, I heard a sound coming from the attic. It sounded like something was moving up there, something big. I got up to investigate, but when I opened the attic door, I found nothing but darkness. But as I started to head back down, I heard a faint whisper, something that sounded like my daughter's name. I rushed back to her room, but she was fast asleep, looking peaceful and unbothered. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off about the house. Everywhere I looked, I saw signs of something sinister lurking in the shadows. My daughter's paranoia was starting to affect me too, and I found myself jumping at every little sound. As the days went on, the strange occurrences continued to escalate. Objects started moving on their own, and the whispers grew louder and more frequent. I found myself constantly on edge, my nerves frayed to the breaking point. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find any rational explanation for what was happening. The house seemed to be alive with a malevolent force, one that was growing stronger with each passing day. I knew that I had to find a way to protect my daughter before it was too late. As the strange occurrences in our house continued to escalate, I couldn't help but feel like there was something more going on. It seemed like every object in the house was imbued with a malevolent force, and my daughter's paranoia was growing more intense with each passing day. One night, as I was brushing my teeth before bed, I noticed something odd about my sonic toothbrush. The power light was flickering in a strange pattern, one that I couldn't explain. At first, I brushed it off as a glitch in the device, but the longer I looked at it, the more concerned I became. The next morning, I took a closer look at the toothbrush, trying to figure out what was causing the strange flickering pattern. But no matter how hard I looked, I couldn't find anything wrong with it. It seemed to be working perfectly, except for the flickering power light. As the days went on, I found myself growing more and more obsessed with the toothbrush. There was something about it that seemed off, something that I couldn't put my finger on. Every time I brushed my teeth, I found myself staring at the power light, trying to decipher its strange pattern. One day, I noticed something else about the toothbrush. Etched into the handle was a pair of eyes, staring back at me with a malevolent intensity. I couldn't believe that I hadn't noticed them before, but the longer I looked at them, the more they seemed to draw me in. I tried to rationalize the eyes, telling myself that they were just a random pattern on the handle. But deep down, I knew that there was something more going on. The eyes seemed to be watching me, following my every move. As the days went on, I found myself growing more and more paranoid. The eyes on the toothbrush seemed to be everywhere, watching me from every corner of the house. My daughter's paranoia was starting to infect me too, and I found myself constantly on edge, always looking over my shoulder. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I noticed something else about the toothbrush. The power light, which had been flickering in a strange pattern for weeks, had changed. It was now glowing in a deep, pulsating red, one that seemed to fill the entire bathroom with an eerie glow. I tried to turn off the toothbrush, but it wouldn't respond to any of my attempts. The power light continued to glow, pulsing in time with my own racing heartbeat. I felt like I was trapped, like the toothbrush had me under its control. As I stumbled out of the bathroom, I realized that something was very wrong with the toothbrush. It wasn't just a glitch in the device, it was something much more sinister. And as the days went on, I knew that I had to get to the bottom of it before it was too late. As the days went on, I found myself growing more and more obsessed with the toothbrush. The flickering power light and etched eyes on the handle seemed to be following me everywhere, and my daughter's paranoia was starting to affect me too. One night, as I was brushing my teeth, I couldn't help but stare at the etched eyes on the handle. They seemed to be watching me, following my every move. But as I looked closer, I realized that there was something odd about them. The eyes seemed to be alive, shifting and changing as I looked at them. And then, in a moment of clarity, I realized that they weren't just etched onto the handle. They were part of something much larger, something that was watching me and my daughter from every corner of the house. I started to investigate, trying to find the source of the malevolent force that seemed to be haunting our house. But no matter where I looked, I couldn't find anything concrete. It seemed like the malevolent force was hiding just out of reach, always watching, always waiting. As the days went on, I found myself growing more and more desperate. The malevolent force seemed to be closing in, and I knew that I had to find a way to protect my daughter. One day, as I was examining the toothbrush, I noticed something odd about the etched eyes. They seemed to be connected to something that was hidden just beneath the surface of the handle. With a sense of dread, I started to scratch at the surface of the handle, trying to expose whatever was hiding beneath. And then, in a moment of horror, I realized what it was. The edged eyes were just a small part of a larger pattern, one that covered the entire handle. The pattern was made up of hundreds of edged eyes, each one watching me and my daughter with a malevolent intensity. And then, as I looked closer, I realized that the eyes were not just etched into the handle. They were part of something much larger, something that was watching us from every corner of the house. The malevolent force had been right under my nose the entire time, hidden in plain sight. And as the days went on, I realized that the edged eyes were just one manifestation of their presence. There were other things watching us too, things that I couldn't see or touch. With a sense of horror, I knew that I had to find a way to protect my daughter from the malevolent force that was lurking in our house. But I knew that it would be a battle like no other, one that would test my will and my courage to the breaking point. As the malevolent force in our house continued to escalate, I knew that I had to confront it head on. But I had no idea how to do that. The edged eyes on the toothbrush handle were just one manifestation of the force, and I knew that there were other things watching us too. My daughter's paranoia was growing more intense with each passing day, and I could tell that she was on the brink of a breakdown. But I knew that I had to stay strong for her, to protect her from the malevolent force that was lurking in our house. I started to do some research, trying to find any information I could about the malevolent force. But the more I looked, the more confused I became. There was nothing in any of the books or online resources that could explain what was happening in our house. But then, in a moment of clarity, I realized that I was going about it all wrong. I couldn't fight the malevolent force with logic or research. I had to fight it with something much stronger, love. I started to talk to my daughter, trying to understand her fears and her concerns. I listened to her without trying to rationalize or dismiss her feelings. And as I did, I started to realize that her fears were not irrational at all. The malevolent force was real, and it was watching us from every corner of the house. But I knew that I had to show my daughter that we were stronger than it, that we could overcome our fears and protect each other, no matter what. With a newfound sense of determination, I started to do everything I could to protect my daughter. I put up barriers around the house, using whatever materials I could find. I hung up pictures of us to remind us of our love and our strength. And then, one night, as we were sitting down to dinner, something strange happened. The malevolent force seemed to retreat, to shrink away from our love and our strength. It was as if it knew that it couldn't win, that we were too strong for it. As the days went on, the malevolent force continued to retreat until it was nothing but a memory. My daughter's paranoia subsided, and she started to feel safe in our house again. And then, in a moment of clarity, I realized that the malevolent force was not just a product of our fears. It was something more, something that had been drawn to us for a reason. And I knew that we had to be prepared in case it ever returned. But for now, we were safe. And as I looked at my daughter, smiling and carefree, I knew that our love and our strength had saved us from the malevolent force that had been haunting our house.